Hello, this is Craig again. Once again, I'm doing another video of my failed testimony series. Although this one is going to be a bit different, thus the different kind of picture that I have up here. This one's going to be about a crash that I've been in about 10 years ago in 2003. And the reason why I want to tell you about this is because in the Christian community, there is debates about different doctrines that go on. One of these debates is between the doctrines of Calvinism and Arminianism. Basically, Calvinism explains that God is, in regards to a person's salvation and being saved within Christianity, Calvinism explains that God is the one who chooses who is saved and who is not. And Arminianism explains that the very opposite of that it is man's choice on whether he is saved or not. But and so there's been a bunch of debates about that. There's even secular debates about fate, such as this is what you're fated to do, this is how your life is going to be, or having the free will to choose your own fate. So there's many debates about that. There's many different kinds of ideas that flow around. And with this testimony about a crash that I've been in, I wanted to show how the reality of this world is more of, it's a little bit of both. That God is in control of everything, yet humans still have free will. So with this, I'll get into the story of my crash. It was October 16th, 2003. I was in high school at the time, and it was a day pretty much like every other day. Except when it was time to leave school, my mom was picking me up. Who was picking me up was late by about a half hour or so. And when she finally got to the parking lot, she dropped a water bottle into my seat so that I can, which was normal, like almost every day, she gave me a water bottle just so that I can make sure I can have water at the end of the day. But what happened was the water bottle leaked into a little puddle on my seat. And when I saw that, I had a sudden urge to not want to sit on that puddle. I had this thought that if I sat on that small little puddle, it would seep through my clothes, like it would seep through my pants, and I'd be feeling it through most of the day whenever I sat down. So I was like, no, I that seems really uncomfortable, so I'm going to sit in the back seat. So I sat in the back passenger seat, and we took off and went our normal route to home until we hit a bunch of traffic on one of the main roads. So my mom decided to turn into a kind of a back road that goes directly straight to our house that we almost never use. And when she did, we went down the road a little bit, and there were two cross intersections that we had to go through. One of them we had to stop for on our side, and then the next one, the crossing street, had to stop, and we could just go through. That's how the stop signs were set up. When we got to the second one, basically me sitting there, like, I just heard a bunch of crashing going on. My sight kind of became dazed a little bit, almost as if I was dreaming in a sense, and I just saw things flying around. I was trying to look out the windshield, and things were just spinning around until finally it all settled, and I ended up being upside down, hanging by my seatbelt. And I realized that we were in a car crash of some kind, and a pretty bad one since we rolled over and turned upside down. So my immediate action was to unbuckle myself and try to find a way out of the car, in which there was um, the truck that we were in was a Ford Explorer, a two-door Ford Explorer. So the back windows were those really small windows that you see on small cab trucks, and one of those windows was broken so perfectly as if it just fell out of place whenever the crash happened. So I found that open window and managed to crawl out. In which, after I crawled out, I looked down and I saw the window perfectly, like, in its perfect shape, as if cracked all over the place, but in its perfect shape on the ground, as if that's, as if it was just like, oh, I just fell out. And I looked at the car and it was completely upside down. It was crushed. The ceiling was crushed completely down to the seats. Everything was pretty much messed up. The back door was like the only door that was not touched, but everything around that door was. So when the firemen and paramedics came, they had like 6 people trying to get the back door open, because even though the door was fine, everything around the door was crushed. The other car that hit us was a van, and like the front was smashed in, and they went into the gorge, where like we ended up going into the gorge as well. We actually ended up very far. We after looking at it, I figured that we rolled about 2.5 or 3.5 times before we finally landed upside down in the gorge on this street. And I came out and I had almost no scratches at all. I was perfectly. I didn't have any injuries, to the point where the fireman interviewing me about the crash didn't believe that I was in the truck that was upside down and crushed to pieces. And my mom suffered very minor injuries. I don't know about the other family, but after that happened, we started to we looked at the details at what happened that day. And the details definitely show that God had a hand in the things that happened, as well as me and my mother and the other person having a choice as to what to do in the situation. And like the details were, the reason why my mother was late was because she lost track of time, but then as she was getting ready to come get in the car and pick me up, she all of a sudden had an idea or a strong influence to grab the cell phone from its charger and charge it in the car on the way over to pick me up. And so she did that. She also grabbed a water bottle and filled it up and then got in the car. Now, the water bottle that she grabbed, that water bottle never leaked before, and it never leaked after that day. It only leaked on that day for some reason. So, and then when she finally came and got me, and I look and I saw the puddle there, I had a choice to where I can either sit in the passenger seat, the front passenger seat, or sit behind it, in which I chose to sit behind. Let's see, what other things are there? One of the other details was that when my mom was coming up to the second intersection that we were coming up to, that she had a feeling to either slow down or speed up because something might be coming. And then it hit. The other thing would be I had a pretty heavy backpack right next to me on the other back passenger seat, and the whole entire time that the car was rolling and flying around, the backpack never hit me. It never came near me. I I actually did not see my backpack again until the very next day when my mom and dad picked it up from the wreckage of the car. Like, the backpack was never near me, which was very strange because, like, you would think that with all the physics going on, the backpack would probably hit me at some point, but it didn't. So those are things I see where God had a hand in everything. He knew what was going to go on, and so he influenced us to prepare for it in some way. He influenced my mother to pick up the phone. He made the water bottle leak so that, and then influenced me to sit in a different seat. Because the way that the truck was crushed was the front passenger seat. The whole ceiling and roof of the car was caved into that chair to where it was touching the very bottom part of the seat. And the same thing for the back passenger seat right behind the driver of the car. That one was also crushed all the way into the bottom of the seat, or pretty much to the bottom of the seat, to where the two safe places that a person could sit in that car and not get crushed by the ceiling or roof of the car and all the force that goes on into it were the two seats that my mother and I were sitting in. So I would say that God had a hand and influenced me to choose to sit behind the front passenger seat, because if I chose to sit in the front seat, I would probably not be here telling you this story. I would either be dead, like 10 years ago, I would either be dead, or I may be in the hospital, or like still in the hospital, or just seriously disabled. Like, no telling what would have happened, but I'm pretty sure I would not be here telling you that I survived this car crash because God made a water bottle leak on my seat and then influenced me to sit in one of the only safe places to be in that car crash. And the way that I see that it was that me and my mother, that human beings still have a choice in those situations, is that when God influenced my mother to get the phone and from the charger and bring it with her, normally we don't carry that cell phone. Like, it 10 years ago, it was back when we had like really dated versions of the cell phone, and most of the time we didn't use them except for emergencies. Like, we never used our cell phones, so we never thought of just bringing our cell phone wherever we go. So the random idea for my mother to grab the cell phone and bring it with her, so that after I was interviewed in the crash, or after the crash, I was interviewed and I was able to call my father so that he can come by and help us out. Like, that what I say was God's influence on my mother. And my mother had a choice to either pick up the cell phone or just forget about it and leave. She also had a choice to just forget about the water bottle and leave because she was running late. My influence to sit, like, God influenced me to sit in this back seat behind the front passenger of the car, and I could have had a choice to just sit there. I mean, like, it wasn't a huge puddle. I could have just sat there and it would have dried by the time I got home. But for some reason, I thought of it would be better to sit in the back seat. So, with my story and with how I think the world works, is that God is in control of everything. Everything is predestined. Everything is known by God. God knows what's going to happen, and He prepares certain things to happen in events. Like, nothing is really a coincidence. The people that you meet, the people that you run into, situations that happen, all those things happen for a reason. And it could be that, like, some other force intended them for evil, or it could be that they the way that things worked out in the world, like that event was going to happen. Either way, I don't know how to get into all that because that's so far beyond our thinking. And there's so much control, and there's so much like so many models of thinking that we can try and figure out, like, well, maybe the world works out this way, or maybe the world works out this way, and in truth we don't know. I mean, we know barely anything about our world. But the way that I see it is that regardless of what caused the event to happen or what chain of events set it in motion, God knew about it. And God was preparing things about it. Or preparing things for us. He prepared my mother to grab the phone. He prepared me to sit in a different spot so that when that event happened, we were fine. We didn't get injured seriously. To the point where when we got to the doctors, they didn't think we were in a car crash at all. They all thought that I was like a witness or something. They didn't think that I was actually in the truck that was smashed to pieces. So, with that, I kind of just wanted to bring that to this whole debate between God predestining and choosing who's saved and who's not, and between man having complete free will of whether we're saved or not, and showing that it's a paradox that our Western thinking wants to separate it and say, no, there's only one solution. Just like how Hercules is only half man and half God. Because it doesn't make sense for him to be completely man and a complete God. It doesn't go with our Western thinking. We want to figure out a solution for like one way of thinking. But it seems like the way that the world works is that there are paradoxes all over the place. Because the Bible teaches that Jesus was fully man as well as fully God. Which means he was 100% of both. Which doesn't make sense to our Western thinking, but that's how it is. And we can see within the Bible that God is in control of everything, and man has free will to make his own decisions. There's a verse in the first chapter of the Gospel of John that explains how God gave man the ability to become sons of God, in which they had the right to accept that and become sons of God. But the idea was not born of theirs. It was God's idea to allow them to become sons of God. And that way, he was pretty much explaining, like, through Christ, man becomes a son of God, because when we believe in Christ, God's Spirit dwells on us. He forgives us of all of our sins, and we become heirs to God's throne, just as Christ is an heir to God's throne. And so we become God's sons again. But we have a choice to do that. We have a choice to either accept that forgiveness and to become a son of God, or to not. And yeah, God chooses all of us to do so. Like, he died for everybody, and he calls many to become sons of God, to become his followers, to become Christian in a sense. And even with that calling, we still have a choice. There's an anime that I watch called Hero Tales that actually shows this very well. There's a main character who's chosen by a magical sword to become king. And everybody is saying this is his destiny, this is what he needs to do. And the entire series, the hero does not want to accept his destiny. He doesn't want to become king. And when he finally says that he doesn't want to become king, the sword chooses another person who was potentially could become king. And I would say that it's kind of the same thing, that God chooses us to become his followers, to become somebody great, and to do his will and glorifying him and showing love to everybody that we were around, to show God's love to people that we were around. And he calls us to do that, but we still have the choice to say, no, we don't want to do that. Or yes, we do want to do that. We can still choose to accept that destiny or to not. So yeah, with all that, I wanted to show that the world is full of paradoxes, that mankind does have a free will to choose to accept God's forgiveness for our sins, and that God is in control of everything and knows what's going to happen, prepares certain things to happen. And he prepares everything to happen for the good of those who believe in him. Meaning, no matter what happens, whether it's good, whether it's bad, all situations can be redeemed for the good of those who believe in him. And so with that, I'll go ahead and leave you and work on a few more videos. But yeah, that was one thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about. And I'll post the verse of what I was talking about in 1 John. I'll go ahead and put it like the whole chapter so that there's context. And yeah, so I'll leave you with that, and see you some other time.